So many people and so many people hidden behind their dark screens. Yeah, if you haven't met me before, hey, there's someone waving. Yeah, come on, let me see all of you beautiful people. Don't be shy. There we go. Okay, I'm Ash Ritter, and yes, I met Angel at MycoFest officially last year, and I'll tell that story in a minute, but I guess it might be my first time meeting some of you all. So I'm just a big nerd, you know. I love plants, I love fungi, and I've made that my whole life study. I'm an ethnobotanist, and by academia's terminology, but really I'm just absolutely and forever fascinated by the connection between people, plants, funga, flora, fauna, rocks, rivers. Um, so yeah, I'll do my best tonight to be a nice blend of nerd, ethno kind of mycology, um, mycochemistry, and silly goose also is part of the requirement here. And also just as an animist and somebody who is quite interested and invested in high strangeness and just being a devotee to the living, breathing world. So let's see how we do together. Um, I've offered many versions of aphrodisiac classes over the years or talks, and these versions have varied. But ultimately, the theme behind all of that runs through and through, which is that we are all connected. We are all connected in an intimate and relational manner. And nature is not separate from you. Our innate qualities make up our inner nature, and it's that natural authenticity in each of us which attracts us, and bonds us not just to each other, but to the land that we love. So, my question here tonight is, could pleasure be a driving mechanism of creation? So, okay, the MycoFest story and where I met Angel is I had proposed a few classes to my friend William Padilla Brown, who is the founder of MycoFest over on the East Coast. And I had a bunch of sort of more clinical-ish ones, and then just as a joke, I threw in, what if I taught a class called the mushroom tip? And he was like, that one. And it was one of these opportunities where, especially as a woman in proximity to the sciences, oftentimes I feel like I have to use the big fancy words in order to be taken seriously, especially as someone that, I didn't end up going to medical school. I don't have all these fancy degrees. So this was an experiment offering this first class at MycoFest where I got to just speak really purely from the heart. And of course, I threw in all kinds of technical data, but it was really just a love note to the mushroom, which ultimately to me is a love note to the fruiting body, which is a phallus, in many of the common forms of mushrooms that we imagine when we hear that word, but also is equally a love note to the mycelium and the darkness and the womb of creation that we can call soil. So I was up there speaking, and before I even got into the details of the talk, I started getting kind of poetic. I think I might have had a few drops of Amanita muscaria in my mouth, and I said something like, how would you interface with the earth if you saw it as the flesh of the Most High? And then all of a sudden, thunder went bang. And I said, okay, I'm going to keep going. And then I said, what did I say, Angel? How does the rain feel on your skin? How does your skin feel to the rain? And what is this place where sensation meets? And then lightning struck the tent. And all of these people were looking at me like, she's a witch. But what ended up happening is we had to get off of the PA system, and I went into the center of the room and gave a talk with no notes. So here's the version of the talk with notes, all right? Um, okay, philosophy first, always. Is pleasure solely a human experience? It's my feeling and my observation that nature thrives off of connection. And when I was in college, in botany class, as a little young sprout psychonaut, and budding ethnobotanist, I remember asking my botany teacher, and I said, "Why is it that plants and fungi make these really interesting alkaloids and psychoactive compounds and all these aromatics?" And what did she say? She said, "They're anti-herbivory compounds. That's it." I said, "Really? Is that so? Are plants pumping out all of this fascinating chemistry to repel us and to repel bugs and to repel birds and to repel creatures?" Um, because these secondary metabolites do all kinds of interesting things, right? As we know. So it got me on this trail of, even when we look at these plants and mushrooms that put out these so-called defense mechanisms that we could call really neat psychoactive compounds, really neat aromatic volatile oils and things like this. Ultimately, that may be a defense mechanism to some critter, but we as humans may go up to it and be like, that smells great. I want to eat it, right? So yes, I think pleasure is a driving force to nature's existence. And ultimately, the desire to thrive and procreate is a magnetic program in the bones of creation as a whole. On a rudimentary level, the chemical ecology is such that our desire and our disinterest, what we're attracted to, what we're not attracted to, literally determines the course of all life on this planet and beyond, right? So, this is a mushroom-centric aphrodisiacs talk. As the popularity of fungi and mushrooms are on the rise, and certainly as we kind of medicalize and memify and pack all these powders and capsules, how do we observe, protect, preserve, uplift the kind of mystique and mystery and living, breathing kind of messy wisdom all here in the mix? So eroticism, in my experience, requires or involves adoration, and indeed it also involves a wee bit healthy amount of danger. Take it or leave it. But indeed, that's how many of us in the West perceive mushrooms and fungi, same way. And Wasson called that what? Mycophilic, mycophobic, right? Ooh, that's a little stinky. Ooh, that's a little scary. Ooh, that reminds me of a phallus. Ooh, that reminds me of rot. Ooh, that reminds me of death. But at the same time, oh, I'm so fascinated by it. Oh, what does it mean? Um, so oftentimes I'm invited into this discussion in relationship to fungi and this love-hate relationship. And anyway, let's just get into it because I could do philosophy talk all night. But really, when it comes down to us, how do our senses and the senses in nature drive creation as a whole? And how can asking questions like this and thinking in this reciprocal way change the sort of format of taking mushrooms? What do you have for this? I need this. I want this. I'm going to take this. All right. Um, so what is an aphrodisiac? You tell me. What is it?
Something that gets someone in the mood.
Hmm. What kind of mood?
Amorous mood.
Mhm. What else? I'm too overstimulated to look at the chat, so you guys just have to say it out loud.
Something that heightens pleasure,
Okay.
Una said.
It increases awareness.
Ah, I recognize that voice.
What's up? I was in your datura class. How are
Uh-huh.
you?
Good.
Pleasure to have you here this evening. Thank you for putting this on.
Happy to be here. Aphrodisiacs. Is an aphrodisiac something that enhances desire? Is an aphrodisiac something that enhances our sense of intimacy? And intimacy to what? Intimacy to who? Are aphrodisiacs something that get us into right relationship with sensuality? Are aphrodisiacs the precursor to great orgasms? Does being turned up and turned on require sex, right? So we could start to really break apart this term before we even talk about mushrooms, is what really is going on here. In the West, or in maybe an allopathic framework of thinking, we oftentimes what's the word, pathologize things. So an aphrodisiac may be considered something where it's like, oh, you're too dry, or you're not hard enough, or you're not this enough, or you're not that enough. But when I think about aphrodisiacs, I don't just think about enhancing the function of a certain piece of anatomy or physiology, but I also think about, do I feel safe? Do I feel awake? Do I have energy and vitality? Um, do I even want to do this, right? Do I feel comfortable? Am I warm? Am I cold? All of these things ultimately funnel into the question of, is this going to be a pleasurable experience? And that pleasurable experience could literally just be walking down the street, living life, okay? Um, could an aphrodisiac be something that supports merging with self, merging with our shadow, merging with our best self, our worst self, merging with a loved one, a lover? But what about merging with land? Or what about merging with your favorite mushroom? Could an aphrodisiac be something that amplifies our encounters to sensation? Or maybe we're already really amped people, so maybe an aphrodisiac is something that simmers down our encounters with sensation. Ultimately, I think the bottom line is we're talking about connection and how to find right relationships and connection with all of these sensory inputs. So I guess the philosophy topic is still going, isn't it? What is our primary sexual organ? Dun dun dun. Are we going to get kicked off of YouTube for this?
The brain, right?
Is it the brain?
Is it your skin?
Is it the skin?
Is it your lips?
Is it your lips? Ooh, okay. I saw that one pop up. Nervous system. Where does our nervous system begin?
In
Right?
the spine?
Oh, does it begin in the spine? I have more questions than answers, you see. Okay, so let's talk about some senses and sensation, because ultimately I think the medium is the message a lot of times as a human in a body. And as a human in a body, we have this really cool opportunity to engage with these senses. How many do we have? A lot of them. How many senses do fungi have? Probably a lot more than maybe we even realize. Senses are a language, senses are a gateway. Senses orient us to space, senses orient us to time and timing, and we all experience our senses differently. Okay, so let's start with sight. Now, our retinas are part of our central nervous system, aren't they? Isn't that interesting to think about? And have you ever heard the phrase, like, you eat with your eyes? I remember when I was just a young sproutling, and one of my mentors, I'm very lucky that one of my mentors, John Baker, was the translator for the Encyclopedia of Aphrodisiacs and the Encyclopedia of Psychoactive Plants, written by Christian Rech. And I got the Encyclopedia of Aphrodisiacs book, and I opened it up just ready to see all this plants and mushrooms. And it was tons of animal parts. And I thought to myself, what the actual F is going on here? And it started to become this thing about visual cues, and this notion of we eat with our eyes, or we start processing information with our eyes or our sight, is oftentimes aphrodisiacs present themselves as a very suggestive thing. So maybe they don't have anything to do with this overarching chemistry that creates this certain performance enhancing experience. Maybe they just look like a vulva. Maybe they just look like a phallus, right? So that keep that in mind. And again, too, where do we see from? Are we seeing from our eyes? Are we seeing from our inner eye? And even in the beyond human perspective is how do plants see us? How do fungi see us? And what would it be like if the next time you went foraging, you went with the element of adoration in your heart? Like, could this be pleasurable for both of us? Let me come to you in my most beautiful form, mushroom, before I pick you, so it feels wonderful for you. Sound is, of course, a part of the aphrodisiac conversation. There is a story being told around us at all times. There are certain sounds that attract us and repel us. There are certain sounds that enhance our sense of safety and certain sounds that don't. So how do we listen, and where are we listening from? Scent. I mean, this is a big one. Here's where we can actually start talking about some fungi. Scent is incredible. You know, as we know, our experience of scent, aroma, goes straight into kind of that limbic, old, as they say, part of our brain that connects directly with the spinal cord. It, you know, bypasses all of this weird metaphysical stuff that we like to do as humans. And it goes straight into that connection that is the driving forces of creation, right? Eat, sleep, procreate. Deep memory access to. Now we make aromatic compounds and we call those what? This is an
Body
interactive
odor?
class. Body odor, yeah. Pheromones. They're metabolites of hormones, right? Fungi also make aromatic compounds, and those are indeed just like our body odor is communicating to another person. This is what my immune system is like. This is my genetic predispositions for this, that, and the other thing. Do you think we could be a good mate? All of that is a conversation happening through smell. Fungi and plants do the same dang thing. So I like thinking about this element, if we're going to talk about aphrodisiac fungi, is this element of beautiful smells. So the first thing I think of, and I brought one of my wee little tinctures over, is candy cap. Who has encountered candy cap lectarius? There's different species. I see. Oh. What does candy cap taste like, smell like to you?
Maple.
Maple. Mm. Candy cap mushroom in the Lactarius genus has the same aromatic lactone that is indeed found in maple syrup, also fenugreek, also curry leaves. You know, whenever I'm out looking for something like candy cap and I'm sniffing around like a little pup, you know, that kind of foraging reminds me to smell the land, and that's just a intimacy in its own right, is sniffing and smelling around. And it reminds me of this article I read once upon a time that it was suggested that the evolution of kissing was originally because we would go up and start smelling our mate, and then we got really close and whoops, you know. So I love thinking of candy caps just as that element of deliciousness and that reminder to go around smelling stuff. Truffles. Shall we speak on truffles, the tuber genus? I know of which there are many. My joke is that truffles kind of are an excuse for really fancy schmancy people to be like primal for a moment and really start sniffing around and smelling some funk. Now, like the biologists would tell you, or you know, ecologists would tell you that truffles are making this aromatic to attract animals simply to spread the spores, right? And maybe that's true. But not unlike the pheromones in us, you know, these truffles are motivated by, they're motivated by creation. They're motivated by sexual reproduction, and they're putting out that smell or that musk to call us over to do their bidding. So is a truffle aphrodisiac for pigs? Is a truffle aphrodisiac for dogs? Is a truffle an aphrodisiac for us? We know that animals, there's many, many countless stories of animals seeking out different kinds of fungi, truffles included, prior to rutting, right? Prior to mating, certain kinds of puffballs with the stags, Amanita muscaria, and bears. So let's see, truffles. I have close to me some truffle tincture from our friend William Padilla Brown. I just reached out to him and I said, "Do you still have this?" And he said, "Yes, I do." So you guys can find on his Mycosymbiotics website. Who knows, one of the many interesting chemical constituents in truffles. That is a neurotransmitter that we also create. Next hint, it's also in chocolate. It's called anandamide. Yes. Have you heard of this? Of course, you know, anandamide coming from the term anand or ananda, meaning bliss. Anandamide is a neurotransmitter that we create that happens to worm and wiggle its way into our cannabinoid, endogenous cannabinoid system. In specific, the CB1 receptors. So anything like truffles will wiggle its way into that. And it's the same place for reference that THC likes to wiggle its way into. And there are many, many sensations that we can attach to anandamide. But there's a definite sense of happiness, of joy, of pleasure. And it kind of goes hand in hand with high oxytocin states. So oxytocin is a chemical that we create that is a bonding chemical, right? It's something that when you look into somebody's eyes for a certain amount of time, when you hug somebody or hug yourself or hug a tree for a certain amount of time, we start to literally flood ourselves with our inner drugs because we are, after all, drug factories. Yes, you are. So anandamide is just one of those things that, like many constituents we find in the natural world, that we also can create endogenously in our minds, in our bodies. And it's pretty darn awesome. So ways that you can stack upon that sort of bliss factor of anandamide in truffles or anandamide in chocolate is by putting yourself in a context where you are going to generate more oxytocin, and that's going to help the anandamide stick around. It's going to amplify it. Black pepper is an interesting compound to combine here with any anandamide containing funga or flora. It increases the activity of anandamide and it slows down the breakdown, basically. Black pepper also arguably might be an MAO inhibitor, so I'll just sprinkle that in there for anyone that is intrigued by that. Touch, right? So we were talking about smell. And what about touch? Touch conveys a lot of data too. Touch is its own language. And I think in the case of talking about aphrodisiacs, sometimes the funga or the flora that we want to ingest is about helping us feel safe with touch, right? So taking down boundaries when the time is right to do that. But boundaries are an interesting conversation and a complex one. I think a lot of times people, especially kind of in the, I don't know, what would you call it? Like new age psychology and herbalism and magic woo stuff. People are talking about, oh, I got to put up boundaries. Oh, this world is too much for me. I got to put up a blockade. I've got to emulate these warmongers and have a build a wall, right? And I'm not sure if that's the way to go. And oftentimes when we get used to being like, I got to build a wall against this crazy ass world, then when we do want to go into these spaces and places where we want to be intimate with self, deeper aspects of self, want to be intimate with land, want to be intimate with another person, it can be hard to all of a sudden tear down all this infrastructure that we spent so much time building, right? So herein lies nerdy Ash is I love thinking about slimy stuff. I love thinking about mucopolysaccharides. I love thinking about demulcents and how they teach us how to have permeable boundaries, right? And we love slime. So of course I'm thinking about, guess which fungus I'm thinking about right now? It could be many, but I'm thinking about Tremella. Oh, does someone have a slimy mushroom they want to say out loud?
I was going to say slippery Jack.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes even just looking at, some of this amazing mushroom photography of these slimy, gelatinous, dripping mushrooms is quite erotic, and at least in my strange and wonderful world. But thinking about sort of the physiological response and connection that we can have to something like Tremella mushroom is this is a very demulcent, as we say, a mucilaginous mushroom. Even the name Tremella comes from the Latin tremere, which means to tremble, which is not unlike maybe an orgasmic state, perhaps. Tremella mushroom, long story short, I mean, we could talk all night about that one, or fungus, but really popular if you've never seen it before. Sometimes it's called snow fungus or cloud mushroom or white cloud ears, white tree jellyfish fungus. It's been utilized in Taoist tonic herbalism and Chinese medicine for gosh knows how long, and even was kind of saved for certain kind of elite classes. Nowadays, very popular in sort of Chinese, Vietnamese dessert soups, and even now is very popular in cosmetics. But it's what we would call a yin tonic. What does that mean? It is food. It is nourishing. It is juicy. It is that good slime that coats the entirety of the gastrointestinal tract and the mucosa. Now, when we coat the entirety of the gastrointestinal tract and mucosa, yes, doesn't that sound so sexy? What we're doing is we're creating a soft, semi-permeable boundary that's going to help us better absorb nutrients, right? Dietary nutrients. But we're also creating a semi-permeable boundary that's going to help protect us from stuff that we don't want to be absorbing into our bloodstream, into our digestive system, right? So if you think about that, as I like to on a poetic level, what we're actually dealing with is, our only organ system open to the outer world, right? Because the GI tract starts where? Around here, your mouth, your snout. And then it ends where? At their genitals. So the organ system open to the outer world, interfacing with what is me, what is not me, what is safe for me to take in, what is not safe for me to take in, right? So slime is actually quite profound if you'd like to think of it in a figurative sense, but also in a literal sense. That semi-permeable boundary is just as a thought could help us sort of lean into that feeling of safety and intimacy with this entire living, breathing world. Also, by the way, that's going to help with, vaginal dryness and all of that too. So just, bonus points, right? So touch. And also just if you ever make Tremella fungus broth or soups and then you pull it out and it's all slimy, I like kind of laying it on and doing a weird face mask with it. So, have fun with your slimy stuff. Never have I made like a lubricant with Tremella mushroom just because the polysaccharides would like ferment and not be shelf stable. But maybe, day 1, day 2 in the fridge, give it a shot. So taste, we kind of talked about that. Taste certainly can lean towards a, aphrodisiac experience. I mean, I think that's why so many people like wining and dining, it's like, let me give you some delicious chocolate cake and wonderful food to get you in the mood. Deliciousness is not just something, though, that we experience with our mouth. Deliciousness is something that we can experience with the entirety of our being, right? So what do I want to say about that? I also want to say that nourishment is an aphrodisiac. sometimes people come to me and they're like, I just can't get in the mood. I don't know why. And I'm like, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating enough food? Are you mineral deficient? And interestingly enough, so many plants that we consider aphrodisiac, like maca is a really easy example. It's just really high in vitamin D, really high in calcium, really high in all of these minerals that most of us may be low on because we're eating food grown in depleted soils, right? In the industrialized world. So nourishment is an aphrodisiac. My grandma would be so proud I just said that. Um, and even looking at something like agaricus bisporus, like little white button mushrooms on your, on at the grocery store, those actually arguably inhibit the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. That's some people would say, and I know there's studies out there that say like, oh, white button mushrooms are testosterone boosting. I don't know if they're testosterone boosting, but it seems that they make testosterone stick around longer. Um, so there's many things we could say. Maitakes, there's plenty of clinical studies showing that maitakes support ovulation, hormone regulation, oyster mushrooms, shiitakes, and ergothioneine, all of these things that are just, we could label as nutrition, ultimately are going to end up giving us that vitality that we may need to be experiencing pleasure and turned on in our bodies and by this world, right? So okay, I want to do a deep dive into reishi and Ganodermas because they're kind of my cornerstone. So I have a little show and tell because I don't do slideshows, but check out this Ganoderma partnership here. Never been able to brew this one into a decoction because it's so cute. So this is a Ganoderma lucidum. I think it's a sensi stricto if you're a nerd and are into those kind of things. My friend Drew grew this. Look at it. Oh my God. Okay, so Ganodermas, you all know the wrap, right? And thousands and thousands and thousands of years of relationship with Ganoderma genus all over the world, right? And of course, we usually want to say, oh yes, we quote Mushroom of Immortality and um, all of these things from China and traditional Chinese medicine because we have written documents, right? But so many traditions don't have written documents. So many traditions of working with medicines and sacraments are oral traditions, right? So we've probably been working with Ganodermas way more than the 4,000 years that it's been written about in Chinese medicine literature, right? And even interestingly enough, and I could go on such a tangent. I feel like this whole talk is a tangent right now, but there is a Chinese text called the Ba Wu Zi, which arguably is the first mention of mushrooms or fungi in written. Some people debate that it's the whatever the Soma, what am I, the Rig Veda and the Soma, but in the Ba Wu Zi they talk about a mushroom. They say a plant of deathlessness that is shiny and red. And all these people are battling, like, is it reishi? Is it Ganoderma? Or is it Amanita muscaria? We want to know. But the plant of deathlessness, brother of birch, shiny. Could it be Ganoderma? Anyway, um, one of my favorite things about Ganoderma, to say it just from a personal level, is it is something that centers the pendulum of the swing of life. We know that physically, physiologically, Ganoderma's reishi and cousins are cardiotonic, right? They speak to supporting our cardiovascular function. They speak to managing blood pressure in a good way. Of course, I can't say things too specifically, right? Because I'm just a lowly herbalist, but they center things in the heart. And when we look at the chemical constituents in reishi, when we look at the constituents in reishi and its cousins, they speak to cardiovascular toning, right? Toning of vasculature, toning of vessels, tissue, capillaries. They speak to our immune function, right? They speak to our liver, right? They speak to our lungs. So there's a lot going on with this mushroom. One of my favorite quotes about reishi is in a Chinese materia medica from the 1500s, and it is, Lingzi positively affects the qi of the heart, befitting those with a tight and knotted chest. Taken over a long period of time, agility of the body will not cease, and the years are lengthened to those of immortal fairies. So this is a tonic. We could ramble all the live long day. What I will say that I think is interesting here for you, my science bros, is when you taste your preparation of reishi mushroom or some kind of Ganoderma, what do you taste? Do you taste the sweetness? Because if you're tasting a sweetness, you're probably tasting polysaccharides, right? And beta glucans, which are the immune supportive compounds. Or do you taste something very, very bitter? If you're tasting something very bitter, you're probably tasting the triterpenes, right? The bitter flavonoids. And if you're tasting that, what organ is it impacting? The liver. Why would we why would we want to talk about the liver and bitters in an aphrodisiacs talk? What does the liver do? It processes things out, right? It's one of our many major detoxification organs, if you want to call it that. So what is it processing out of the closed loop known as our blood system? Stress hormones and sex hormones, okay? So sometimes someone may say to me, I need help getting in the mood. And I say, how's your lifestyle? And they say, I am stressed out to no end. I hate my job, all these things. There are so many stress hormones pumping through the body of this person. And then it's like, maybe let's do a little wee bit of liver stimulation here to help support the metabolizing out of excess stress hormones. Because by the way, if there's too many stress hormones recirculating in the bloodstream at all times, guess what? That's going to make the sex hormones wonky. And you may be over or under producing sex hormones to compensate for the backup that's happening in the liver because it's trying to process all these dang stress hormones out. Does that make sense out loud? Sort of, kind of? Okay. We also have in the reishi spores, which are kind of fun if you like being fancy. Choline. Wow. Choline is amazing. Choline is something that a lot of times people know choline in egg yolks, and it's primary for cognitive function, right? It's so important to have choline in your diet in order to have clear and coherent thinking. So now why would choline be an aphrodisiac compound? Well, I sure as hell hope that you have clear and coherent thinking when you're choosing your partners and who you want to get down with, all right? Now, also the reishi spores and Ganoderma spores sometimes are considered kind of a hypnotic sedative. And I've read this in text and I've done some of my own experiments, and I feel like at high threshold amounts that indeed can be an experience. So you'll just have to find out for yourself, my friends. And if you're doing any sort of wild foraging, that's the fun part, right? Is to go visit your local Ganodermas and see what kind of concoctions you can make at different stages in its appearance, right? How it's probably going to have more polysaccharides when it's younger, more tannins when it's hotter outside, right? More bitter compounds. And then what's it like when you work with the sporulated Ganodermas? So just something fun to play with. Gosh, I mean, I could ramble on and on. Okay, cordyceps. I feel like everyone, cordyceps is sort of the like aphrodisiac fungus meme. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it is my favorite fungus for thinking about the breath. It's something that I definitely love formulating with when, say, for example, somebody has chronic asthma expressions. Now, of course, in, memeified, it's associated with stamina, it's associated with athleticism, and of course, all of these things are going to be really delightful in an aphrodisiac context. Um, Stamina, of course, but kind of coming back around to this notion of the breath. It's funny because in the West, if you look up breath in the dictionary, it comes from like the Old English for odor and stink. But if you were to look up the meaning of breath in Sanskrit prana, it's like a sign of vigor, energy, power, a strength and heart. So our relationship with the breath certainly can be um, a profoundly embodying, a profoundly heightening, a profoundly psychedelic, and even mind-altering experience. But ultimately, our relationship with the breath is about connection. It's about connection between the inhale and exhale. It's about connection between myself and the air and this world. And perhaps it's about the connection between myself, the breathing person, and my partner, the breathing person, and what happens when we commune in one breath, right? Um, Also, too, when I think about kind of this sort of synergy between Ganodermas, reishi, and Cordyceps, I think about this relationship between the heart and the breath, the rhythm of life and the breath of life. Um, so yeah, I could ramble on, but I'm going to keep it pushing. You guys doing good? Thumbs up? Okay. Um, yeah, let's get into a little bit weirder domains. I guess too, I was gonna make a joke about the Ash Ritter stack copyright. Just kidding. I don't have a patented stack, but I was just gonna say that the way that we formulate, the way that we engage with our mushrooms of choice, the way that we engage with our herbs of choice, right, it has to be, in my opinion, uniquely for you. Has to be uniquely personal. Know thyself, right? So we can have our tonics, our food, our main components, our main compounds, like say, for example, well, Reishi's, here's our buddy tonight. You can have your main tonic. That's your food. That's your food for thought. That's your food for heart. That's your food for liver. That's your food for immunity, right? That's your food for health. That's the long game, right? But then we want to stack that with the short game. We call that acute use, right? So what sparks us? That could look like something warming, right? When we think of aromatic compounds, when we think of spicy foods, those things warm us up. And what does that look like in the body? It's a circulatory effect, right? And when we enhance circulation, and especially when we move circulation more efficiently to the periphery, that will enhance the function of where that blood is flowing, right? So even when people utilize terminology like, oh, that guy's hot, or we're getting hot and heavy, right? There's a certain like thermal dynamic to being turned on. And maybe somebody is too hot, right? Maybe they're too fast. And you've got to be like, hold your horses, guy. So understanding yourself, understanding your partners, and understanding the thermal dynamics involved literally could look like we're going to add in something heating, like a little bit of cayenne pepper and a little bit of cacao and a reishi mushroom beverage, right? Or maybe it's going to be we're going to add in something cooling to kind of slow things down and get a little bit more, connected to the breath and connected to the body and just like take it easy, right? Um, Aphrodisiac stack also must include something about mental health, right? And emotional health. It also must include something about safety. So all of these things are very, very important. You make your own stack, my friends. Uh, Spicy honey cacao. I see it. So we have to talk about entheogens. I wouldn't be me without them. And what is an entheogen? What are psychoactive compounds? Well, I think the entirety of this world is a psychoactive experience. Living in this world is quite mind-altering in its own right. And when we think about psilocybe mushrooms, I think about, because we've been talking about the senses, right? I think about, what about the sense of intuition? What about the sense of magical timing, right? Is time not time, our relationship with timing, not one of our senses? Where am I, right? Where am I in space? Where am I in time? Intuition, is that not one of our senses? Psilocybe mushroom, it presents many ways for many people. It presents many ways depending on the cultural context in which it's embedded in, right? As we understand it in a chemical context, this is a serotonergic being, meaning that it acts much like our serotonin in our bodies, which a lot of people in kind of the clinical sphere say, oh, we associate serotonin with happiness. And I say, is that true? Is that true? Because SSRIs don't necessarily always work, right? So why, if we took a bunch of serotonin compounds, why am I not more happy in this crazy world? Psilocybe mushrooms and their serotonergic nature, to me, show us about connection. And oftentimes I think in a disconnected and fragmented world, or in a fragmented self, connection brings us happiness. Connection brings us purpose. Connection brings us closer to joy, right? Now, I'm not saying everybody go out and, do illicit things. What I am saying is that when we think of compounds such as this, when we think of a beautiful mushroom being such as this, we're thinking about expanding beyond the confines of our normal operating system. We're thinking about expanding beyond the confines of what's tried and true, and creating new connections. They are amplifiers, and that can be a very profoundly connecting and intimate thing, or that can be a scary as hell thing. So I just want to throw that out there. And just food for thought for people that like looking at pictures of molecular structures. If you look at serotonin, you look at psilocybin, and if you look at auxin, have you guys, gardeners, biologists, you know about auxin, AUXIN, the rooting hormone in grass? What does auxin do in grass? Teaches grass roots how to grow out, right? So now we need to be smart and careful when we want to engage that impulse in us of our grassroots to grow out. My question becomes, towards what end? Where do you want to grow out? And with whom? Okay. I got to talk about Amanita muscaria here too. I know that there's an Amanita muscaria flying ointment that's going to make its way to one of you lucky lucky peoples here in the space. Amanita muscaria, I kind of have a love affair with, as I do with many mushrooms and plants. Amanita muscaria, and this is where the joke is about the mushroom tip title of class, is so many people, and same way with psilocybes, so many people, nowadays, as all these things are kind of becoming less tinfoil hat-y, they say, oh yeah, bro, how many mushrooms did you eat? How many, let me, you want to take. And everyone's kind of looking at this sort of fruiting body, this phallus, this individual guy popping out as something to just take and grasp. And I want to have as many as I can. And then when I reach this threshold dose, then I'll be cool enough. Then I get to wear that hat in town, right? And Amanita muscaria makes me think a lot about beyond that fruiting body, what is actually happening here. We have a mycorrhizal being. We have a being that lives, much of its bulk is underground. much of its bulk is not only underground, but it is interwoven and embedded and interconnected with all kinds of wonderful trees and all kinds of wonderful critters hidden below the depths in the darkness, in the womb of creation, right? So Amanita muscaria I adore because it reminds me of this ultimate wild interconnected consciousness that if we are willing to drop into that notion of shadow, we realize how damn connected we really are. So I know this is sort of a how do you say, controversial one in many mycology spaces, and certainly in many mushroom identification books. It has the big skull on it and it says toxic. And, you know, we can get into my philosophy talks about what is toxic and what is not. And, you know, how, is the news toxic? I mean, is acorn toxic? You know, how do you treat something that's toxic in order to make medicine and make magic with it? Amanita muscaria has really interesting chemical compounds that do really interesting things in our bodies. And we could talk a lot about that. I think a lot of people do, and I have plenty of talks about it if you're interested in the fine details. But when we have a fully cooked or decarboxylated, prepared, and please do your research, right? But we have something that is cooked, that is heated, that is, you know, the chemical constituents are decarboxylated or transformed, we get something that is a GABA agonist. We get a chemical compound, we get into relationship with a chemical compound called muscimol. Now, what is GABA? What does that do? All my tea drinkers out there, you know, sometimes when you drink a lot of really fancy oolong tea, you get this sense of sort of this dynamic relaxation, this sort of sense of peace and quietude, right? Oh yeah, I see that in the chat. Passion flower too. That's right. Valerian too, right? These are GABAergic beings. GABA ultimately, quite differently than psilocybe and how that presents. GABA brings down our sensory input system and quiets the transmissions, literally. It simmers down overexcited nerve transmissions. Why is that an aphrodisiac? How many neurodivergent people do we have in the space tonight? Sometimes we want to be intimate with someone. Sometimes we want to be, yeah, sometimes we want to be intimate with the world. Sometimes we want to be socially, you know, connected. But it's just too much dang data. So something that's GABAergic might be an interesting way to simmer down the excess transmissions and come into a present moment. We also have a mushroom in this case that is very interestingly enough, it kind of turns down histamine response, mast cell stimulation. So, and this is true for Ganodermas as well. This is true for a lot of mushrooms, actually. But when we turn down our histamine response, so for those that don't know, when you're allergic to something, you have critters in you, we call them mast cells, and they go alert, 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 alert. We have an invader. We have a problem. We are not safe. You need to hyper secrete, right? Runny nose, everything makes me sneeze, everything makes me, right? So now we have something like Ganoderma, like Amanita muscaria, simmering down mast cell activation, ultimately saying to us, actually, my dear, you are safe. Okay? So safety is a big part of talking about aphrodisiacs because you are not going to feel a lot of pleasure if you don't feel safe. You're not going to make the fluids that you need to have a fun time in bed if you don't feel safe. This is a big and deep and dynamic conversation that we could go into at length. Okay. And I guess to speak to the kind of, since we are doing a giveaway tonight, to speak to the story, the short story behind why I made an Amanita muscaria flying ointment. For those that don't know, flying ointments are a sort of controversial tradition. When I was looking into the entheogens of my ancestors in Eastern Europe, and flying ointments are basically fats, like oils and fats that were infused with herbs and potentially fungi and rubbed onto the mucosa, which could maybe include the vulva, vagina, anus, to absorb interesting chemical constituents and receive transmissions from that chemistry. So when I started learning about that, and I said, you know what, I got to try this for myself. And I was a young person at the time, so I, was very much just fully in academia and fully studying all of this from my head. And long story short, when I started creating different herbal lubes, to say it plainly, I started learning how to engage with plants and mushrooms through my body, through my womanness. So, if you want to hear my backstory of why I decided to make an Amanita muscaria flying ointment, I have a 9-hour muscaria class on my website and some other history of flying ointments talks and things too. But yeah, that chemistry is absorbed through the mucosa. So be careful. It's also pain relieving, so it could be used as a massage oil. And also speaking to pain relief, I mean, one of my mentors, he says, and I'll always quote him, Dr. Profrock, he says, the United States, at the time he said this quote, he said, the United States utilizes 80% of the world's opiate pain medications. Do we have 80% of the world's pain? So pain relief is a big conversation. And it is right there in proximity to our talk about pleasure. And of course, for those like kinky freakazoids in the space, pain and pleasure, there's a lot to explore there. But working with something like Amanita muscaria topically can be a profound pain reliever. When you have pain relief, you may be more likely to experience pleasure in your life. Okay. On and on and on. I guess I'll try and wrap it up here and just say kind of the microscopic microcosm, lest we forget that we are worlds unto ourselves. We are zoos for fungal and bacterial beings. There are fungi not only all around us, but upon us and in us, and possibly even operating as us, not quite like the cordyceps that shoots through the ant's skull or brain and all these things, but or maybe, microbiota, the fungi and little bacteria beings that we interface with on the daily absolutely speak of intimacy. For example, when you're making a home fermented sauerkraut, you are conjuring your local flora and eating it and becoming it. That is intimate as heck, you guys. Microbiota speak of intimacy and I think that they speak through us, you guys. They move us. They utilize the funhouse of this human body. And I want to say that I feel like the microfunga, the microbacteria, they are the organic algorithm. Are they possessing us? Maybe a little bit. I think more so it's like a digital algorithm where they point us towards ways and means to ensure our mutual survival and thriving. So think about it. Fertile land, fertile life.
Amazing. Such a great talk, Ash. Love it.
Well, and let me just wrap up too by saying, when we look at the terrain, it helps us look at ourselves. Why are mushrooms trending now? How can we be better in relationship with the phallus, the mushroom fruiting body? How could we be in better relationship to the womb of creation, the mycelial mind, And what really is an aphrodisiac? How do we fall in love with this world again? And how do we fall in love with ourselves? So yeah, I know we want to open it up for questions. I could ramble all night long. Yes, yes, yes.
So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, or you can also put your question in the chat. We'll take a few questions and comments, and then we'll do the giveaway.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, any want to make any comments or spicy? I see spicy honey cacao all day from Sophia.
Woo, woo, woo. Sophia, is that my friend?
Right. I don't see any hands raised. Y'all are quiet tonight. I
Yeah,
know it's a rainy night.
just a comment. I think it's so fascinating too how like some of us are just we get enamored by like what are disgusting scents to some people, or like how the fungi they grow on like dung. It's like kind of what they're attracted to. Some fungi. I think that's so interesting too. How like roses obviously everybody likes, but then there's like a certain genus of people that like nasty smells.
That's right. That's right. Well, and even it's like one person's armpit will smell like heaven to you, and one person's armpit will smell like not so heaven to you. And that's just this deep magnetic beyond conversation that's happening. So yeah, the funk, uh, that's certainly part of our conversation around eroticism, and even thinking about sort of the musky smells of sexual fluids are very much found in different plants and fungi as well. So, these things remind us of sex, these things remind us of death, these things remind us of our mortality, of our immortality. It's paradoxical, it's confusing, and that's the essence of the human experience. And love at its finest is a paradox and confusing, right? It's wonderful, So yeah, I love what you said there, Andrew.
Yeah, I love getting people's smelling notes on stink horns because it's always different. It's like some people like the smell, some people find it like the putrid excrement of the earth.
Right. Well, even something as commonplace as like jasmine, it's like there's that beautiful, or lang lang, it's like there's that beautiful floral, high volatile compound, but then underneath you're like, that's a little bit like cat piss or a little. So it's I think sort of the like crossing the wires does interesting animalic things to our brains that it's a profound experience. And it is
Yeah.
hilarious. I love reading people's notes on like truffles. Same way. Same way.
Yeah, it seems like culturally too, like it's very different because our ingredients are so cultural too.
That's a fact. That's
Yeah.
right.
So Cheyenne asked, what are some of your favorite books on this topic?
Oh my God.
And I'm sure
The earth is the book, my friend. Go out and smell and taste and dig and touch. I mean, I love books too. Books are like my, what do you call it? Savings account. My entire savings account is books. But I mean, I have to give a shout out to the Encyclopedia of Aphrodisiacs by Christian Wretch. It's a fantastic and fun and wonderful book. Uh, so maybe we'll throw that one out there. And maybe my book in the future. Hint, hint.
yeah. Well, let's do the giveaway and then we'll jump back into questions and comments. So, So I did a random number generator And the winner tonight is Sarah Walker from Washington State. So
Congratulations.
yes, and I actually have your address from your registration. So look for some flying ointment coming to your door.
Dun, 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 dun. And I made a discount code for my entire website for everyone too. And it is Love Thy Fungi. L-O,
Ooh, that's a
Love
fun
Thy
word.
Fungi. I think I made it good through the end of February. So if you're interested in, I have I think like 50 hours of class material on my website, and then some kind of weird, fun, interesting compounds and concoctions. So check it out if you like.
Excellent. I dropped
Yeah.
your website in the chat.
Thank you.
Don't have it. So
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Margaret, you had your hand raised. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I wanted to add something when we were talking about boundaries and everything. This is something that I have personally been exploring over the last few months. And I heard someone speak about boundaries as they call it the ecotone. The ecotone is where the two ecosystems will kind of like meet and rub up against each other. And we often spend a lot of our time trying to avoid those. But what I have noticed recently is there is a lot of intimacy at the boundary, at
That's
the
right.
portion where you're not sure if you're going to grow or collapse or both or anything like that. So I think it's worth exploring, if only to become more intimate with yourself and seeing how that kind of spreads out and what that can create as you are going through this life. So yeah, that's my
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I mean, that's the beautiful, it even makes me think about the permaculture principles, right? Which is one of them is the boundary is the place with the greatest diversity, you know? So I love, 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 love thinking about that whole premise of when I told the story in the beginning of when the lightning struck the MycoFest tent, as I was saying, like, how does it feel for the rain to touch your skin? And how does it feel for the rain to meet you? And what's happening in the middle there, right? So it's a profound meditation to explore ultimately how we relate to the entirety of creation. The good, the bad, the ugly, the rot, the funk, the decomposers, the beauty, the nectar, all of these things create opportunities where we can explore where is it fun to lean in and merge, and where is it valuable to push back, and where can I remain curious, you know? And ultimately, I think curiosity is the ultimate aphrodisiac at the end of the day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thunderstorms. That's partly why I live in the Southwest, as monsoon season is just pure drama and eroticism in the sky or between heaven and earth. Because we could even talk, I mean, you guys know, those of you that know me know I say I'm a lightning devotee, and you know, the lightning is sort of the amplification and the marriage between heaven and earth. And what does that do for our fungal friends? Well, they grow really, really well and almost compound tremendously where lightning strikes happen. So a match made in heaven and earth. Hmm. I'm starting to look at the chat. Anything? I'm here for the Q&A, y'all. Let's talk fireside chat.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay.
I thank you for the tincture. That's super awesome. Or flying ointment.
Oh, yay, you're the winner.
yeah.
Congrats. It's
Yeah.
topical.
Very cool. Very cool. That's exciting. And that's a new concept to me. So that's super interesting. And yeah, I guess I just want to say thank you for your awesome talk. I'm having some slight technical difficulties, so I was off camera and muted for most of the time. But everything you're saying is resonating a lot, and a ton of new information that's interesting too. So just thank you for sharing and offering this.
A pleasure. Feel free to email me if you have questions about the flying ointment and which direction to go with that.
Yeah, definitely. I will. I'll reach out. I'll reach out. Yeah, I that was my first thought with like when you were talking about, the edge effect basically was like, oh, like in permaculture, like, ecology, like the edge effect is kind of the boundaries or where we see all the excitement, like a different kind of edgy. So I like that. That concept is interesting. I also really like the concept of a semi-permeable membrane in biology. It's another one of those things where like we see in nature and then it just like zooms out from the microcosm to the macrocosm of like how that system can play out or be like a lens to understand something. And I definitely think boundaries is like so key in any, arousal, amorous partner type situation. Um, Even in a not like sexual with your partner situation, just having that safety and feeling like what is you and what is other and being comfortable to where that transcends, like, where am I part of the group? Where am I a part of this partnership? And where am I a part of this like biological community? So that's super interesting. You're blowing my mind.
Well, you know what you just made me think of too, and I guess I want to be careful again to not get kicked off of the get you in trouble, Angel, on your YouTube. But even thinking about edging, when we're talking
Right.
about orgasm and we're talking
Yeah.
about this notion of reaching an edge and how do you stay at an edge and stay in a threshold and then go to another place. So there are many poems in our midst, and those poems can be inspired just as much by mycochemistry. They can be just as inspired by morphology as they are, to this sort of tripper poet people. So, and I'm seeing the chat brimming with wonderful things tonight. Now that I'm looking.
Yeah, so Rebecca asked if you could buy the ointment on the website, and yes.
Yes.
But
I
save
have
one for Sarah. I'm about to hit the buy button.
I have two flying ointments, herbal, fungal, uh, erotic massage oils that I've been making for many years. One is not containing Amanita muscaria, so that might be more friendly to many of you. So yeah, they're on there. And I have a few classes now that kind of touch on the subject of the tradition and the history of flying ointments. I have an interesting class that actually there's a lot of mushroom talk in a forbidden fruits, ethnobotany of forbidden fruits course that I offered last year or the year before. I talked a lot of smack about Gordon Wasson in that talk. It was great. No, just, you got sometimes somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
Bless his heart, though. Bless his wife, I'll say.
Yeah, his wife. Yeah.
Bless Valentina Wasson. Anyway, I'll curtail my rant there.
So someone asked about the recording. So the recording will be on our YouTube channel. You can watch it right after this is over. You can play it back, but the link, if you registered through the website, the link is in the email. So it's also on the same web page. It's just embedded on the page if you scroll down further. But someone did ask about, they wanted to mention how shiitakes extracts are added to some lubes.
I'm seeing that right now. That's from the awesome Psychonaut Marine. Awesome fount of educational material. And yes, I mean, that's a hugely important point is thinking about topical applications of herbs and mushrooms, and even just the act of providing something that's going to tighten tissue states, that's going to be anti-inflammatory, is going to be profoundly beneficial in erotic contexts. So again, I think a lot of times when I come to aphrodisiac talks, people expect me to talk real nasty, and I'm like, no, we're just talking about good mucosa and tissue states and mental health and right. And all of that is good stuff. So, but yeah, awesome. I didn't know that about the shiitake extracts. That's an awesome comment.
There was a comment from Esther too about cat piss. Just turning a corner. Cat piss is a positive descriptor for Sauvignon Blanc wine. Horse manure in small doses is also positive for red wines. Esther, do you want to elaborate any more?
We're all a bunch of freaks and weirdos if we like.
Got to be in the smells. If you
To
like
each his, to each his own. To each his own. Has anyone read the Smellosophy book yet? Mm-hmm. Just throwing that out there. Oh, what am I drinking? I'm almost done with a tisane of pink lotus petals, one rose, some skullcap, so I wouldn't be as nervous being on screen with 45 of you. And I dropped some Ganoderma suge tincture in here from a wild harvested from Mount Levin. Shout out the mountain. And I've had many various tincture in the last 2 hours. Yes.
I wanted to ask, what part of Arizona are you in?
I'm in the Sonoran Desert.
Okay. Or Tucson area, or is that
Tucson.
Sonoran?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just visited over the holiday and went to the biosphere, which is so freaky.
Oh.
It's like, what is this?
That's for people that don't know what that is. I think that's what inspired the Pauly Shore Biodome movie.
Biodome, yeah, like the parody
Yeah.
of it. But I just met someone recently that also had met the kind of original people from like the desert in New Mexico that helped start it. I guess there's a documentary about it as well, called like Earth, Space, something Earth.
Spaceship. Okay.
Spaceship Earth, I think.
Mm.
But yeah, a fun place to go for if you're curious about plants and what humans will try to do to grow plants in the deserts.
Mm. Well, and a lot of people when they hear I live in the desert, they're like, "How could you do that if you love mushrooms?" I'm like, "We actually have a lot of really interesting fungi out here at this elevation, which is like 2,000 something-ish feet." There's some interesting stuff going on hidden in the woodwork. Of course, like the stalked puffball, is probably the most prominent one that you see around town. But once you go up in elevation, we have Mount Lemon, we have Mount Graham, we have all of these incredible mountains, Chiricahua Mountains, where there's a incredible, beautiful array of, wonderful, wonderful mushrooms, wonderful fungi.
Definitely want to go back and visit the Sky Islands.
Yes, indeed.
I was seeing Sky Islands, and that in itself is very exciting.
Yes. Well, and I feel like while I remember, because I usually forget to do this all the time, if anyone wants to stay in touch, find me. I'm no longer that hidden in the woodwork. I only got comfortable coming on screen a couple years ago, but I have an Instagram, Black Sage Botanicals. I have a website, blacksagebotanicals.org. I have a Patreon page. I have a huge amount of class material, a huge amount of free podcasts out there. So find me, and I'll be doing some teaching tours this year in person, and I'll announce them soon because They're still a little bit secret right now, but stay tuned. Stay tuned. I will be out in the world, out of my little gnome hermitage at the edge of the desert. So I'd love to high five you guys in person. And I'll drop you with some tinctures.
Yeah. I've turned off the live stream, but I was curious too if you, and you don't have to comment on this because it's all just